Hi, ranchers. Welcome to Mindfulness with Marcia. First of all, I guess I should invite you here into my space. I'm here at home today recording Mindfulness with Marcia. And, every container or space that we find ourselves in, well, when you're mindful about space and your surroundings, it puts you in a different mood or place. And when I was reflecting upon what I was going to share with you this week, just being in this space versus at work brought me to a different place than what I thought I was going to share. I know back in July, I dabbled a little bit in that idea of finding space in our lives. And I remember distinctly at that time, I was struggling with way too much on my mind and my heart, and even in my body. I was feeling some physical pain just because of the stress I was dealing with and under. But after receiving perhaps the most compassionate and wonderfully vulnerable feedback from ranchers out there dealing with your own fogginess of life's journey last week, it just seemed mindful to revisit this idea again to provide reflection in case you weren't with me in July. And if nothing else, a reminder. Sometimes I hear teachers, or I go to classes, or I read books, and I hear things again and again, and I think, oh, I know what this is about. And I'm always delighted that I learned something new, because I think this is just like life's journey. We always learn things that are new if we look at things with the curiosity, as I've talked about before, as a child, like this is the first time I'm listening to this, or even, we go into a meeting or a training or whatever, even listening to a friend that might be telling you the same story you've heard like many times, with what am I going to learn new this time? And so I'm hoping that by looking at this from a little different perspective, we might see things differently and clearly, kind of like the fog that I shared with last week. We might be able to, we might not be able to change that go, 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 go task orientation space that you might find yourself in right now, but hopefully finding the emptiness or the void or space in life will bring you a lot less stress and more peace in your life. Not too long ago, I was trying to remember when, but I know it's been probably since the summer, a mindful teacher posed this question. It was either in a reading or a class or a blog or whatever I was at. What's the wallpaper in your own mind? And he went on to say, what I'm trying to say is, what's your everyday preoccupations that fill up that wallpaper in your mind, like weeds or grass that start taking over your yard or garden? I know personally, and I bet if you're out there and have ever done any kind of gardening, even if it's in a pot, somehow weeds and aggressive grass can take over and take over quickly. And that's similar to what happens with things in our mind. Usually these things, these weeds, these suspects include maybe reoccurring worries. I know right now with the pandemic, you don't have to really think about it too much. And if you're human, you're going to have reoccurring worries about COVID-19. Perhaps for you, it's issues with work, resentments that you might be carrying, or regrets. It can be a lot of different things that are your weeds or your grass that keeps coming back and kind of sticking to that wallpaper in your mind. And we can try to be more mindful of these. Obviously, that's part of mindful living, is to recognize them and disengage faster before they really start taking over. In other words, we weed our garden, we hoe it before it gets out of control, and those things the weeds get really deep rooted. Now, I've spoken before about noticing and being aware of these suspects and deliberately shifting your attention to something that's more positive, more interesting, brings you joy. Think of somebody that really, in a compassionate, loving way, And you try to invest yourself more in those topics that are positive rather than these that tend to be more negative. Because, yep, this helps your brain rewire out of that negative bias that is just naturally going to happen. Now, I don't have to tell you that all of our lives are different living and coping with a pandemic. And as much as I've looked and searched and studied and talked and spent the night all night letting it bother me, quite honestly, there are no silver bullets out there. Yeah, there's bits and pieces of truths and facts, but really, this is a whole new dimension for all of us to have to deal with, because it's not structured, it's not cut and dried. There isn't an answer. And even when you find something that works here, it doesn't work there. And it's so intimately involved in our lives and everything that is how we live our life and how we relate to one another, that it's very disruptive, I guess would be a good word. And so I know I have found, in speaking with others, we talk about how we have our life or the things we were doing before this came upon us just last spring. And yet then we have all this to deal with on top of it, but we didn't get rid of anything else. And so we feel like we're lugging around a lot more stuff. And I really think we have to give ourselves permission. And it's almost more than self-care. It's like almost a necessity. And I hope you'll understand what I mean, that we have to drop some of this stuff that no longer we can afford to lug around. Not right now. Now, I don't mean you have to get rid of it forever. And I hope to explain that in a minute. But right now, let's make a promise to one another that we can let some of this stuff lie. There we go. Can you be more specific, Marcia? Yeah, I can. So let's think about this example. At sea level, if you were walking with a backpack on and you had a brick in it, you would feel some of that weight, okay? But if you were hiking up on a mountain, well, then that brick has got to go, because all of a sudden now it has totally changed. The circumstance from which you were in, not the brick in your backpack, not the way you're walking, not your own body, but because of the elevation, the weight of that brick has changed. And I think similarly, if you're a human like me, and I'm assuming you are, most of us have some habits, those autopilot activities, indulgences, grudges, or fixations that were okay. I mean, they were okay. They may be things you wanted to change a little bit, but they were okay, and they were, making do even a year ago. But now, my friendly ranchers, with the changing circumstances, what changing circumstances? Well, because of pandemic, maybe you have financial constraints. Maybe just trying to socially distance. I know at school, it's a big issue all the time. Just remembering that you have to do it because it hasn't become like a normal, regular mannerism in life. And, the social distancing or social spacing or whatever you want to call it, think of all the implications that even has brought on with your social networks and activities. We just can't see people the way we used to and do the activities that we used to, because we're not supposed to be close. I mean, I know for me, I'm a hugger, or at least if I'm not going to be hugging somebody, I'm going to be, tapping with my hands or high-fiving or something. I haven't done that now in months and months and months, and I notice it. I notice that it's like a brick that's starting to feel heavy in my backpack. Maybe you're schooling your kids at home. I know for many, not seeing elderly family or friends, it's so hard. Or maybe like me, I'll just admit it, just our own aging. I sometimes think, is it just because I'm getting older that, this is bothering me more or what? But, these new and I don't want to call them new normal. It almost sounds like that's something we need to embrace. But they're new ways, they're facts that our old habits might be, running into a conflict with and wearing us down, robbing you of peace. And honestly, my friends, they really need to go. So, what's your brick or bricks? And what would you gain by emptying it out of your own backpack right now? And also, what about those spaces on that wallpaper of your mind where there is just space? Or in other words, there's some emptiness or a void. See, being more mindful of that element of space, of openness, of the possibility to reserve capacity and really settle into some of the emptiness in your life. If you're a type A personality like me, that was almost like unheard of. Like, I can't have any emptiness. I have to have my calendar booked every hour on the hour. I have to have tasks to do on the weekend. I have to have plans. If I'm going to get in the car and go somewhere, I'm going to know all my stops. Now, that's one extreme that I share with you, but working on my own crapola, so to speak, I've learned to understand, like in the fog, that there's something to be learned, something to be savored, and there's this peace in just the emptiness and not always having to be doing or being about something. A quote I took from a book, which is a little woo-woo-y. I mean, I've had to look at it several times and think about it, but I think it has a lot of meat to it. And I'll quote that here. It says, consciously appreciate the beneficial somethings that are the gifts of various nothings. Consciously appreciate the beneficial somethings that are the gifts of various nothings. I'll let you chew on that one this week. You see, mindful living prompts us to enjoy emptiness in the forms that speak to you. Perhaps it's at night when everybody else is asleep and you're getting ready to sleep and you're just with yourself and there's this empty quiet. A blank page in your journal rather than the ones that are all filled in already. What about, a friend's receptive listening? They're not talking, they're not giving you any advice, they're not paraphrasing what you say. They're quiet, there's emptiness, a void almost in conversation, and they're listening. One I've always cherished, and I don't know why, I'm sure it has some meaning to my personality, but that open counter, in my kitchen, that space before I begin to cook, I've always, whether I'm baking or cooking, I've always kind of cleaned up the whole area because I just felt like that space was necessary for me to start. I know in the summer, one of the first things I do before I tackle summer projects is I clean my office and I clean my space. It's like, okay, there's an emptiness here. And it's not just like because now I have space to fill. I've done that before, but it's like now I have a place to let my thoughts go and calm my mind, become still. One of the hardest ones, I have to share this one, is a Saturday with no plans. I've done it a couple times intentionally to see how I'd fare. And I have to say the first time it was kind of uncomfortable. It's like, what do? I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. But honestly, once you start to recognize the peace and the joy and the fulfillment that comes from spending, even if it's just a few moments in that void, emptiness, space of life, it's profound. It really is. This week, I'm going to challenge you to not only still think about that quote, and maybe some of you will rewind and write it down and put it on a card and remind yourselves of it and think about it. But pause this week and reflect on what your brick or bricks are that you don't want to lug around right now. You don't need to carry it right now. Perhaps it's a brick that you will get rid of forever. You know, it's like, this isn't working for me now, and it really never did. This is going. But it might be that it's just one or two that you can put in storage. You know, set it on the bottom shelf, throw it in the back of the closet, just for the time being, just so that you will have some more space. You'll have some time of peace, and you'll have a time to intentionally seek it. You see, if you're like me, it won't just come because I always had a life that had to be so filled. I had to intentionally work on my calendar. I had to intentionally wait patiently for the coffee pot to finish so I could get my coffee. I had to intentionally plan a Saturday with no plans. So maybe that's something you'd like to do, is to do something intentionally where you need to just be quiet, patient, and live in the void for a while. But whatever it is, remember that it's adding to your mindful journey. And that's always a plus, to have mindfulness. And when you're doing it, be sure to stay safe and be well. Bye until next week.